Hello, everybody. Welcome to our third cross-stitch crafting for the holidays class. I see some familiar faces in the chat. My monitors are over here and my camera is right here. So I just love to take a quick look. Oh my goodness, we have somebody here from London. Alejandra, she was one of our Stitch People Day winners, I believe. You've got a kit on the way for your giveaway.
No, it arrived.
Oh, it arrived. Oh, good. Hi, Alejandra. So fun to see familiar names. Oh, Laura says, I look stunning. That's very nice, Laura. I have to give all the credit to trying out bolder lip colors. And I tell you what, it makes a world of difference to wake up a face. Jamie from outside Chicago. We've got Laura from Wales. I would love to go to Wales someday. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us from all around the world. I just can never get over it. It's always one of my favorite parts about these classes. I know I should craft and I know I should, but I just can't get enough of the around the world unity around cross stitching and crafting. So I'm going to switch my, oh no, I've got a little housekeeping. I always get ahead of myself because I'm excited. Just a couple reminders. So if you've just jumped into this class and you missed the first two, that's okay. Just like our host said at the beginning, we have our first two classes available to watch on Michael's YouTube channel. So you can go back and watch those. We learned how to make an ornament out of a finished cross stitch project using a small embroidery hoop. I have it right here. I'll show it to you. How about that? It looks like this. It's a little snowflake. How cute is that? So we did this in week 1. Week 2, we learned how to do a gift tag so that you can make little custom gift tags for everybody for your gifts. So go back and watch those classes and check out everything else Michael's has to offer. We also did a series of classes back in August. So if you're new to cross stitching and this series caught your attention, but you don't yet know how to cross stitch, that's okay. Look for Stitch People's first class with Michael's. We did a little Sherlock Holmes pattern, and it teaches you how to cross stitch, some basic embroidery techniques. So doing that class, which you can watch on Michael's YouTube channel, will get you all caught up to how to cross stitch and make these patterns to follow along with these classes. And we have one more this time next week. You can go to stitchpeople.com/Michaels to sign up for that one, so you can sign up for them all individually. Lastly, we'd love to see your works in progress, and we'd love to see your personal spins on all of these patterns and projects that we've been doing with these classes. So if you post on Facebook or if you post to Instagram, make sure to use the hashtag #MakeItWithMichaels and hashtag DMC and hashtag Stitch People. It's that little trifecta of hashtags that helps us find you, see what you're up to, and give you some digital high fives over the internet. We sure love to see it. Because like I said, it's the around the world, like everybody's working on similar projects from Chicago to London. How cool is that? I just love it. So let's connect online. And without further ado, let me switch to my stitch view. So hello, forgive my my nails. I've gotten some comments on these. They're growing out. I just haven't had the time to redo them, but I am keeping them manicured. Thank you very much. Today we are working on the Cookies for Santa craft idea. The idea behind this, I don't know if you all have seen this, but if you're doing coworker gifts or neighbor gifts, or even if you have a big family and you kind of just give little simple family gifts, I've seen some really fun and creative things done with mason jars. I just filled mine with some biscotti for some nice visual appeal, but I've also seen some really fun ideas where people will layer in the dry ingredients of cookies like brown sugar, white sugar, flour, baking soda, salt, chocolate chips, whatever it is, and it's all ready to go. And it has like a little label on you know, how to make the batch of cookies, what wet ingredients you'll need to add, you know, all the rest of the recipe instructions, just a little cookie making jar. You could also fill it with candy, whatever you want. But what we're going to do today is work on making the lid really special using whatever cross stitch projects that you'd like to use. You can totally think outside the box and make these whatever you want. I just want to give you permission to take the sparks of inspiration from this class that give you whatever special ideas you come up with and run with those. Your creativity is what makes you unique, and you should absolutely do what you feel inclined to do. So today, I'll walk you through some of my creative sparks with what I would do with this mason jar lid, so that when you gift it to somebody, not only does it have candies, cookies, whatever you're doing in here, but it has a really fun Christmassy or holiday or personalized lid to go with it. So I will jump right into that. The first thing you're going to want to do when you're doing unique cross stitch or crafting project like this using something other than a traditional embroidery hoop or frame of some kind that you're used to working with, first thing you want to do is measure it. You can probably look at the mason jar packaging, whatever jar you're using. I know there's different brands, whatever the packaging label says, it will tell you probably, what the diameter circumference of things are. But I think it's always a safe bet to double check and measure, because it could be referring to, I'll just use this as a little pointer. It could be referring to this edge, to that edge, you never quite know what exact measurement it's referring to. And what we're going to be working with is kind of this insert template and what I'll refer to as like the frameable part of the lid, because we've got this little metal lip that curves around. So while we could plan for edge to edge, what's going to be visible is this inner edge here on the inside. So it's always smart to measure, and I've measured this at about 3 inches. So if I hold my measuring tape really, really close to this edge and I pull this over, I've got about 3 inches here wide, where that's my display area, is a 3-inch circumference all the way around this circle. So what I've done is I've gone ahead, and I've touched on this in other classes, but so apologies if this is repetitive for some of you, but I definitely want to touch on this in case this is your first class with us. There's a little bit of math involved whenever you're converting a cross stitch project into a frameable area. So we have a 3-inch circumference, and you want to take into account a few things: the size of your Aida fabric and the size of your pattern. So for those of you who don't know, Aida fabric comes in rolls where, like this, where you will see the count. It's always defined by a number. 14 count is this particular package of Aida fabric. What that number 14 means is you have 14 squares of Aida fabric, or stitches, cross stitches, that you'll be able to complete in an inch. So if you go to a size 11 Aida fabric, it's going to be a little bit bigger because you're only putting 11 squares of the weave of the Aida fabric, or 11 cross stitches in the inch. So those are going to be a little bigger than a size 14 or a size 18, where you're squishing now 18 stitches into an inch instead of just 11. So as you're working on something with, say, a 3-inch diameter or circumference, I don't know if I use the right word there, it's 3 inches all the way around. 3 inches times 11 squares or stitches per inch is 33 squares, right to left, up and down. If you're using a size 14 Aida fabric times the 3 inches, you've got 42 squares left to right, up and down. If you're using a size 18 fabric, you've got now 54 squares to fill. That is pretty much, that's 21 more squares of stitching that you'll either have, just blank space around the edges, what have you. So if you really want your motif, your pattern that you're working on to fill the space, one way you can do that is by using a smaller scale pattern that'll take you a little less time to stitch, especially in an instance like this, where you might be making a dozen of the same thing or similar things. And, we don't all have all day to sit around and stitch necessarily. Would that it could be that way. But in that we do have limited time, a way you can save yourself a little bit of time when stitching is using a slightly bigger Aida fabric and getting a little bit of a bigger bang for your buck as far as size is concerned. So thinking through that, I've gone to my pattern over here, and I just sort of loosely sketched out the edges of what this circle would be. We put a circle in this pattern just to give you a little bit of a reference point. I traced all these down into here, and I can count that this pattern is, let's see, it's not quite to the pattern itself, but I am going to just count around the circle because that's an easy point of measurement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. This is why they call it counted cross stitch. Because there's counting involved. Bada bing, bada boom. And I know, because this is a gorgeous circle, that all sides are basically 24 by 24 by 24 squares is my pattern. So if we're looking in accordance with our little math cheat sheet that I did ahead of time here, the 24 squares is going to fit nicely, I would say, in the size 11 Aida or the size 14 Aida. The difference between 24 and 33 is about 5 squares. So I'm only going to have a few squares of white space, dead space, whatever you want to call that, around my entire motif here. If I did it on size 14 fabric, I would have just about twice as much on either side, 42 squares versus 24 in my pattern. So hopefully walking through that a little bit, I know I kind of sped through it, but I hopefully gave you the bullet points of what you want to think about when you are choosing a cross stitch motif to use in your sort of customized cross stitch crafting projects that you're doing for the holidays, be it an ornament, a gift tag, or a mason jar lid like we're doing today. So that's our little math lesson for the day. Ding, ding goes the bell. And now we can go to our locker and get a snack and move on to our stitching portion. Oh, I grabbed two flossies just flew at me. We are now going to do a little bit of technique, because what is a cross stitching class without a little cross stitching technique? And wouldn't you know it, my needle disappeared. I've got to get a new one. Watch your feet, Spencer. Oh, I don't know if I introduced Spencer, my hubby. He's here. He's helping. This is Spencer. He's really great at monitoring questions. So please feel free. That's he's also, well, he's very great at a lot of things, I just have to say. But in this moment right now, what he's primarily helping with, after getting me all techie and set up and lit and cameras running, he's monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. He will know if the question needs to be vocalized, because he also kind of has a loose idea of my lesson plan today. So he'll know to not mention it to me because he knows we're going to go over it today. But if it is an interesting question, especially one that would apply to many people, he'll let me know and we'll answer it while we go. So today we're going to learn French knots. Oh, one thing I should mention, I'm sorry, before I move on, depending on the size Aida fabric you're using, you're going to want to adjust the number of threads that you use from your embroidery floss. So as many of you are familiar with, DMC's 6-strand embroidery floss, which is kind of the industry gold standard. I love this. There's like hundreds and hundreds of colors. When you pull the floss out, you can see it's created of 6 threads, more or less twisted together like this. So if you're using a size 18 fabric, again, that's going to be a little tighter, little smaller cross stitches. You're going to want to use 2, maybe 3 of those threads. And this is a little bit up to personal preference, but it's also up to, you know, just the logistics of how much floss the holes in the Aida fabric can handle based on the size of the Aida fabric. So size 18, I'd recommend 2 to 3 threads. Size 14, I really like 3 threads. Some people like it looks a little bit cleaner to some people to still use 2 for size 14 Aida. And some people like a fuller look and use 4 for size 14 Aida. So that's going to be probably your most variable option. And then size 11, definitely at least 3. I like the look of 4 for size 11 because it's just a little fuller. However, in this case, we are going to be doing French knots. I just pulled out this blue because it would be a little more visible to show you the threads against the white paper. But
a question before we get too far into it.
Thank you, Spencer.
Mary asks, for those who are cutting their fabric to stitch this, how big do you cut the fabric? That's
a really good question, and a really good one to ask while I still have my math up here. So I'm going to just write here 2 to 3 threads like we talked about, 2 to 4 threads like we talked about, and at least 3 to 4 threads here. As far as how big to cut your fabric, a safe rule of thumb is to always give yourself an extra 2 inches of space on all sides to work with. So this piece is pretty massive. That said, so we'll just walk through. Let's assume you're making the Santa pattern, and let's assume you're doing it on size 11 Aida fabric. That's what I've done, so it will translate. We have 24 inches by 24 inches as our stitchy motif area, more or less. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I misspoke there. 24 squares or 24 stitches by 24 squares or stitches. So that equates to, let me see, 24 stitches by 24 stitches divided by 11 squares per inch is about roughly 2.1, 2.2 inches. I'll just say 2 inches by 2 inches, because 11 times 2 is 22. 24 is not that much of a difference. So we'll say it's about a 2 inch by 2 inch motif on size 11 fabric. The size of that motif will change depending on the size fabric you're using. But for us, we've got about a 2 inch by 2 inch motif. And because I've already stitched it, we can double check that here. So right to left, that is correct. We've got about 2 inches by about 2 inches there. So your fabric then, you would want 2 inches on all sides. So 2 inches to the left, right, bottom, and top. That means we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches by 6 inches. So you'd want a minimum of fabric. Again, mine's pretty big, just the chunk that I cut. You want about 6 inches by 6 inches, and that'll give you plenty of room. Many of you who've worked with Aida fabric know that oftentimes it will fray. You can see even I've got a little fraying edge because it's such the way that it's weaved together. This stiff kind of weave, this can really fray. So if you're working right up close to the edge of your motif and you've got that fraying starting to come in, it's like, uh-oh, you don't want to be sweating bullets that your fabric is fraying. So if you give yourself that 2-inch buffer, then you have plenty of room to stick it in a frame, plenty of room to handle it, plenty of room to frame it and do what you need to do. And that was a really good question, my friend. So thank you for asking. So now we're going to learn about French knots. A lot of people struggle with French knots, but I hopefully will demystify them for you today. When I cut a length of floss, as many of you like to know, I usually go up like mid bicep. I'll hold it in my fingers like this at the end, and then I extend and cut about a mid biceps length. I just find in my personal preference that that's a really great length of floss to work with. Now, what we're doing is French knots in the pattern as polka dots on the wrapping paper of this present. I don't want these to be super chunky. I want these to be cute little polka dots as though it were part of that wrapping paper. So I'm not going to use 4 strands of floss, even though that's what I cross stitched with, because it's a different type of stitch for a different purpose. The cross stitching helped me fill out my pattern. The French knots are just a little detail. So I'm actually only going to use 2 threads. So I just separate those threads ever so gently, and they should pull right apart. If not, just you'll get a little 3-way tug that you can just sort of work with. And I'm going to just run my fingers down this floss so this twist isn't too intense. And I'm going to thread my needle. I'm a licker. And just use the little spit to get the ends of that nice and easy to work with. Thread the needle, and here you go. Now, as with cross stitching, when I'm doing French knots, and I am starting from scratch, my floss is completely fresh. It's not hooked into my fabric at all because I haven't been doing any stitching with it. So I still don't use any knots. What I like to do, I typically only use French knots with my projects when I am adding details like this, like the polka dots. So what I like to do myself, and because I'm making this into a mason jar lid as part of this class, I'm not using a embroidery hoop or frame right now because I don't want to, I've already ironed this out nicely around the edges. I don't want to add any more creases. So I'm just going to handle this for the sake of instruction today loosely. So what I like to do is I don't use any knots. I just leave a little bit of a tail, and I hold that tail at the base of the needle is where I hold my needle so the tail can't slide through when I pull on it. And I like to do something that I just do for myself. I didn't learn this anywhere. I just sort of figured this out. And this is a little Lizzie method that works for me that I will pass on to you. And if you are a super duper, by the book traditional stitcher, and this is insane, I apologize. But what I like to do is pre-secure my floss, because a lot of a French knot success has to do with having good tension. So what I will do is just sort of start my floss by, on the back side, looping my newly threaded needle and floss around some of the existing stitching in the back. You'll get a little tail. You can see that pulling through. Don't let it pull through all the way. Rather, just keep looping on the back side there. You can even grab the loop with your needle and make like a little loose, I don't know, is that as a slip knot or something? Just a little loop around itself. I just like to run the needle behind the existing stitching a few times. And once more, I'll just run my needle into the loop of its own self to create not a knot, but just a securing. And now if I pull my floss, you can see that's really secure. That's really tight. And when I start doing my French knot, that's going to be very helpful. So I like to pre-secure my floss, and then I work from the front of the fabric. And we're working on this little present here. So you can kind of do the polka dots just randomly, however you'd like. So I'm just going to stick my needle up through the stitching, bring it up all the way. I'm just emphasizing that it is nice and tight in the back there, and that pre-secure that we just did is at play right now, and thank goodness. So now that you've pulled it all the way through, what I like to do is take the slack that's close to where the floss is coming out with my left hand, wrap it 2 times around my needle that I'm holding with my right hand, continue to hold it with your left hand, feed the needle back down, and you want to go very, very close to where you came up through the fabric, but not using that same hole, because I'm going to let go of this and we'll revisit that in a second. What's essentially happening is you're bringing your floss up through the fabric like this. You're creating a knot here, and then you're putting the floss back through the fabric. And by essentially securing with the floss on the back side, and we've already pre-secured one side, it'll pull that knot tight against your fabric. If you use the same hole, even though you have a knot, depending on how small that knot is or how big the hole is, the knot could just pull right through. So the reason we want to, again, I hold the floss with my left hand, wrap it around my needle twice that I'm holding with my right hand. The reason we bring that tip down very, very close to where we came up initially is because we'll inevitably catch some threads of other stitching, of the Aida fabric, what have you. Will catch at least one thread of something else that will provide a little resistance and prevent that knot from pulling through to the back. So you stick your needle very close from whence it came. Push that through. I'm going to get rid of this white so it's a little easier to see. And as I pull my needle through to the back, you'll see that it creates a loop on the front side. And you can pull those twists that were around your needle tight. What I like to do is the entire time that I'm pulling this through, I like to keep my left hand around the loop that forms to give it that tension. Like I said, the key with French knots is tension. And there will come a point where you can't pull that anymore, and you're going to have to kind of roll it off your finger, but you keep a little bit of a handle on the floss as it's pulling through. And oh my goodness, there we go. And it's just sort of a little back and forth here. There we go. And then you have created a French knot. So let's do it again. We'll do a few today.
Will you do a big one too? Sue was hoping to see how the pom-pom was done, which is just a much bigger.
Yeah, big French knot. I'll do like a big pink one as kind of a bow there. So let me bust out a few of these little delicate ones. Oh, thank you, Spence. So you bring your needle up. This one I'll do a lot faster. Make sure you have that tension there. Hold the slack with your left hand, wrap it around your needle that's being held in your right hand. Feed the tip of the needle down very close to where you came up. I like to hold on to that the entire time if I can. You pull your needle with your right hand through. It will create a loop. Let it loop around your finger, or keep a close hand on that tension as it comes through, and then you'll get a French knot. That one tied a little bit tighter than my first one, but I don't mind.
Does this change because you're stitching just with no hoop or frame or anything?
Right.
Does this change if you're using a hoop?
I think it's easier if you're using a hoop because it's a little bit easier to hold on to what you're doing. Like right now, okay, so I do this and I would be holding my hoop like this, and it would give me a little bit, you know, my fabric is bending right now. So doing it in a hoop is much, much easier. So highly recommend stitching with a hoop all the time.
Any reason you're not right now?
Yes, because I already ironed this in preparation for crafting with it later during this class. So I don't want to add any additional creases. Whoop. So hopefully this is demystifying French knots for some of you a little bit. I'll just do a couple over here, finish my polka dots, and then we'll do a big pom-pom.
Jamie is preempting a great question. What happens if you wrap more than twice?
Oh, you get a bigger French knot. Come on. Sometimes it feels like it's stuck. I promise it's not. It's just getting too tight too fast. So you might just have to use your needle. I'm a big proponent of using your needle as a tool more than just a poker. A lot of people think needles are just for poking and carrying thread. No, you can use it as a tool. Like right now, mine got a little bit stuck. It felt stuck. I promise it's not actually stuck. So I just sort of lifted the knot up with my needle, and that gave it just enough slack for me to continue to pull it. And oh, it happened again. There we go. And just sort of feed the floss through itself again. So because my first French knot tied a little bit more loosely, I'll show you what happens when you twist more than once so that I can get another bigger French knot to have a little bit more of a randomized French knot situation. So you bring your floss up. If I wrap it, say 3 times, like I just did, and then you poke it back through very close to where you came up, and you can pull that nice and tight. It just gives it more weight. It gives it more material. And when you pull it tight, you'll see, ta-da, it is a bigger French knot in comparison to the others. So now I will show you what to do for an extra large French knot. I like to just, once again, loop my slack on some of the back side stitching to secure it, and I clip that off. Now I'm going to, if you want a bigger French knot like the pom-pom in Santa's hat, that one I will use 4 strands for. So I'm going to do this exact same stitch just over here on the gift, just improvising a little to show you this technique. So I'm going to make a bow out of the same pink floss. I'm going to use 4 strands. So that's one way. There's a couple ways to get a larger French knot. One is by twisting the floss around the needle more than twice. Another is by using more threads, more strands. I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle. I'm going to do, what do we do first, everybody? Pre-secure the floss. There's a game show for you. So I'm just going to loop my floss on some of the stitching on the back side. Just so that can't go anywhere. Boop, boop, see, nice and tight. And now I bring my needle up where I want the French knot to go. So it's going to be a big bow here in the center of these ribbony representative floss stitches. Bring that up. I now have 4 threads. So this is already going to be a thicker French knot like the pom-pom. What I'm going to do now is, okay, you see how I'm twisting? You can see all the little twists in my floss here. Can you zoom out for me, Spence, a little so that they can see the full picture here? So I've got these twisties happening. This helps me know that my floss is indeed a little twisted. Whoa. So what you can do, I'm going to switch to my camera, is thusly, if you hold this up like this and let your needle drop, it will often untwist itself, but you can then run your fingers and just get your needle untwisted just like that. So back to stitching. And now if I lay it down, I still have some kinks, but they're not loops around itself. So that's better. So I've brought my needle up where I want the French knot to go. It's nice and tight because of what I've done. If you can zoom in again if you like. Now what I'm going to do is loop. Again, I take the slack of my floss very near the fabric with my left hand. I'm going to loop it around my needle 4 times. 3, 4. And then what you can do. So we have increased our threads. We have increased our wraps. The third thing you can do to get a big French knot is allow it to lay loose as you secure it. So I'm going to stick my needle back through very near where I came up in the first place. Keep my fingers on that left side of the floss. And as I pull that through, you can see that there's some looseness happening. I'm not pulling it very tight. I could, if I wanted to, I could really pull with this left hand and tighten up all these loops that were around my needle. But I'm going to let them be loose. I'm just going to trust this floss to pull through itself. And now is the point that I'm going to play with a little bit of tension. I'm going to just, again, it's a little bit of back and forth. If you go slow, you can sort of see it in action. And I don't want it much tighter than that. So I'm just going to leave it and pull it tight. And ta-da, we've now got ourselves another big, round, beautiful French knot, just the same as Santa's pom-pom. So hopefully that helped. Sometimes if you go real big, you'll see how when a French knot is created, there is sort of a side at which it's secured. If you can look really closely, that side is right here. I can kind of loop and show you these threads right here are securing the round twists of this French knot. Sometimes when you do a big one, this will be real scawampus and it'll lay like real 3D like that. Hopefully that makes sense. What you can do is just a little tack stitch. Mine wasn't laying that way, but I made it lay that way as an example to you all. And what I'll do is just bring my needle up. I like to do it just next to the French knot, just so it stays clean. And then I come in kind of from underneath the French knot. I just go right through the loops of that French knot that are sticking up. And then you can see that if I pull this tight and just create a little tack stitch, whoops, it'll just hold the sides of that French knot down ever so and just let it lay flat. So you can kind of tack stitch it into place if it's not cooperating, which does happen when these get big and unruly. But now we have like a big old bow on our present, and that looks really, really fun. So great question. Hopefully that helped. Just as a review, I'm going to secure my floss just by running it through the backside stitches here. The 3 ways you can increase the size of a French knot is in the number of threads you're using, the number of times you twist it around the needle, and in the tension that you allow as you pull it tight. So there's your big takeaways for today. So now let me check my time. Oh, good, 12:30. We got plenty of time to turn this into a really cute mason jar lid. So I'm going to get rid of my stitchy things. I'm going to just clean up my space. Spence, can you zoom out for me? Yeah. And I'm just going to get rid of, don't need our math equations anymore. Don't need our pens anymore. So there are a few options. Let me just take a drink real quick. Wet my whistle so I can keep talking to you. We've got a few options as to how to get this in the mason jar lid. And we've got a few options for how to finish it on the back side, because I mean, you could, I went through, you can see where I use this like dark blue and I've got kind of a raspberry red. I went through, I had a bunch of like ends frayed all around just because stitching this real fast. So I took some scrap floss. And what I mean by that is in my floss kit, I need to bundle this one up. I keep like lengths of really long strands that just feel like a waste to throw away. So this is what I mean by scrap. So I just took a long length of that. I had some blue and I just kind of on the back side threaded it through and just kind of tucked and tightened all my little ends. So that's what all those bursts of color are. So I could just leave the back side visible like this in the mason jar lid. Essentially what I mean by that is it works very much like an embroidery hoop if you're catching on to that. But essentially we'll cut this to size, then I do this and you can secure it like this and just leave it. Because it does, you could utilize the jar in that way, have it seal on the lid of the jar, and that could be your system. If you're finding it's not quite right, if it's a little bulky, if it's not holding it in there, you could ignore this piece because you're giving it a new lid, especially if this is like candy or something non-perishable. But depending on how you want to finish it, you could lay the fabric in the mason jar lid and do like a felt backing and just kind of press it in there and secure it all. And you leave it like this. I'm going to go the first method and kind of use that as my back, as though this were the inner hoop of an embroidery lid. Hopefully that makes sense to you all. So what I'm going to do is use this jar as my frame. I need my pencil and I don't know where my pencil went. I thought I had one. Oh yes, I did. I just put it in my drawer, silly me. Okay, so now this is where it gets a little tricky because you measure twice, you cut once, right? That's the adage, the old adage. And I'm just eyeballing this for now. Again, I'm on the back side of my fabric, and what I'm preparing to do is cut my Aida to size to fit in this mason jar. And so it looks more or less centered to me. I'm going to quickly count from the top of my motif to the top of this jar lid. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish. Down here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish. That's okay, because one thing you want to account for with a non-symmetrical pattern is the Santa hat is technically the top of our motif, but I do have this huge portion, more than half of it, that does not go up this high. It stays down here. So even though there's 7 on the bottom and 6 rows of slack on the top, I'm going to call that good, because visually this from here, it looks like 8 rows. From here, it looks like 6 rows, which averages out to 7. So side to side, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish, which is great because that's similar to what we have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I am going to scooch. But see, once again, there's more visual weight over here on Santa. We have his small bag, and then we have his tall hat and his wide shoulder. So even though by my scooching the lid this direction, it's technically more accurate as far as like the side to side goes, visually, it's not quite right just because of the visual weight. So you want to just trust your judgment, use a combination of counting and your eye. And I'm going to call that good. And I've just got a mechanical pencil that I'm going to lightly trace around this frame. Now keep in mind, what I'm tracing is the visible area. I still have this lip in the jar that, that goes from the actual edge to the jar. What is that, about 1/4 inch? The actual edge of the jar to the inside visible area is this lip. So what I traced here ever so lightly, oh, it comes up really nicely on the camera, is the visible edge. And that's something to keep in mind as we cut, because we're going to want to cut actually outside that visible edge so that we have enough slack to hold it all down in here, while at the same time making sure that the threads of the jar lid are still able to screw onto the jar and twist, right? So there's a little bit of moving parts in here. This is why crafting for the holidays can be a very intense endeavor. So you just got to be careful. I also want to encourage you to think ahead as to what else, if anything, you'd like to do with your cross stitch craftiness, in addition to just the cross stitch. Here's what I mean by that. When you have your cross stitch piece in here and you screw the jar lid on, if you like the minimal look and you just want it to be a jar with Aida fabric on the top, great. All you need to do essentially is, I will mention, we trace that visible area. The inside of the lid does accommodate for that edge that we need. So you could then kind of layer over this, trace that, and you just get an exact kind of stamp so that you just have your jar, your cross stitch, call it a day. But I know a lot of you are more creative than that. So the reason I'm saying think ahead is if you want something cute, I have seen mason jars with like a fabric little frilly around the edge or a ribbon around the edge, something like this. So if you want to do that, you're going to want to figure out how that all attaches to each other. I've got a few options here. I just have like a little frilly edge like this. So if you're wanting a little bit of a frilly edge to come outside of the mason jar and look really nice, either you could glue that directly onto the mason jar lid itself. Excuse me, frog in my throat. My voice is a little hoarse today. Excuse me. I apologize. If you want any fabric coming out the side of the edge on which to attach this ribbon, one more drink. I just had to get a cough out, so we muted. If you want any fabric coming out the edge on which to attach the ribbon, you'll want to accommodate for that here. If you want it to be the Aida fabric, which can look very, very crafty, kind of organic, depending on your flavor there. You could also double your fabric and have, cut a circle of something else that's really festive and have that be the fabric that's kind of coming out around the edge. I hope I'm trying to just kind of brainstorm and give you some ideas of things you could do that would affect this moment in your planning process as to how you anticipate cutting this out. So one more cough, excuse me. Honestly, I don't know what is going on with me today. Just like a little frog right there, just wants to get out. At this point, I'm going to experiment with doubling up my Aida fabric with this cute festive fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'll deal with the Aida fabric first. And pro tip, again, we trace the visible area. The visible area is the unrubberized area. So we've got about 1/4 inch around our visible area that if you just go around the edge of the full jar, should give you all the slack you need to cut And yep, see, we've got about the same amount of space there as that rubberized area. So you can kind of eyeball that and check yourself. Now, whew, now comes the cutting part. Deep breaths, it'll be okay. And guess what? If you cut it funky, nobody has to know. You just make it work. Change your plan. Nobody knows the original plan. So if your plan goes awry, just change it. Make it something else. Or if you have to start from scratch, good thing you used larger size 11 Aida fabric to save yourself some stitching time on the smaller motifs. So you don't have as much space to fill. Hey-oh, tricks. Starting over is never a bad thing. There's my life nugget for the day. Never be ashamed to start over. Or to change course, or to pivot. Any Friends fans out there? Pivot. Pivoting is always good. Look, Spence, I'm talking while I'm using the scissors.
I'm very impressed.
I know. Usually I get like very hyper focused. So now we've got our little Santa. There he is. And if we wanted to, we could lay him right in this jar. We could put in our rubber lid and like, ta-da. Yeah. There he is. Top of our jar. How cute is that? How stinking cute is that? You could call it a day right there. If you wanted to make sure he's really secure, you could dab a little bit of glue, and I would say on the farthest edge of the lid. You don't want to dye the fabric, depending on the glue you're using. Always, you know, we've got now this big scrap that we cut the Santa motif out of. Test your glue here, see if it's gonna like bleed into the fibers. You never know. Always test writing utensils, glue, soaps, whatever on scrap. That's always the safe bet. One other thing that you want to do is if you've got this cute jar and you want to make sure Santa's like straight ahead. See, we've got like the fancy writing here, and then you want Santa to lay straight. What I would suggest is just making sure you could use the writing on the jar as your guide, and just make sure, you know, as you're twisting things on, you can kind of hold that in place and twist that around it so that Santa lays how you want him to. So that's just something to think about as well. If you want a little bit of padding, sort of like a quilt-like padding, I just pre-cut a circle of crafting felt, available at any Michaels stores near you or online. And you can give yourself a little bit more padding, like I mentioned, like a quilt, that just sort of, it's a nice finishing touch. And I'm just going to lay them together. The other option for gluing would be to sort of tack stitch your Aida fabric onto the crafting felt around the outer edge that's not going to be visible, and then glue the crafting felt to the mason jar. There's a little glue workaround for you. So you could put that in there, and what that's going to do for us is give us just a little bit more padding, so that it's just a little bit more luxurious, I guess, is kind of how I might describe that look. It changes the look ever so slightly, and it gives you a consistent, you can see through the holes of the Aida fabric. So if you put a white felt behind there or a red felt and add a little holiday burst of just the illusion of a little color showing through those holes, that's another little way to get creative. Now, what I'm going to do in our last 15 minutes is create like a little, I'm thinking of it like, you know, when you make a fancy bed, and that just goes to show you can imagine what the beds in my house look like. And it has a bed skirt, and you know, you've got your cozy mattress with the blankets and pillows, but then on the box spring, you have a little bed skirt that's covering the underbed area down to the floor. That's kind of what I'm gonna do here and now. So I traced my jar on the Aida fabric, so I'm gonna do the same thing here. And I'm tracing just, this is a piece of scrap fabric that I had around. You can go out and find something that appeals to you. And what I'm going to do is cut this fabric out, but I'm just going to eyeball it and leave like a solid inch around that edge.
Normally, I was going to say, normally I'd get after Lizzie for moving that up in the frame, but
hyper concentration. The scissors are out. Do not disturb while using scissors.
I'm not about to tell someone with scissors what to do. So.
Ah! Okay. I'll show you what I mean with my bed skirt for my jar. I hope you like this idea. I think it'll look really cute.
A great idea came through in the chat.
Yay.
Once this is framed and all ready to go, perfect Christmas ornament. Once like they unscrew it from the jar, put a little ribbon on it.
It's a great size. Yep, that's a great idea, whoever that was. Good on you. And I love KO. Great strong initials. I happen to know, I grew up in Rochester, New York. Every time I hear somebody with K as initials, George Eastman, who is the founder of Kodak, his mother's name was Catherine or something like that with a K. And George's opinion was that the letter K was the strongest letter in the alphabet. That is why Kodak starts and ends with a K. Fun, useless fact. So I'm just I'm being very careful because I don't want any of these cuts to be too straight. I don't want this to get too out of whack here. But no, this is a great size for an ornament. And what I would say too in that case is you could also like finish the back of this somehow in a handy way. It's a great size. Sometimes you can't always find ornaments, frames. There are some like cross stitch ornament specific frames that you can find, or the gift tags that we used for our last class make great ornaments of a smaller size. The embroidery hoops tend to be a little bit bigger. So if you are looking for something smaller, definitely. Okay, my friends. See, that's exactly what I didn't want to have happen. I'm just going to even out that chunk. Okay, so now I've got a nice round thing. I'm going to do this. And I'm not, just for the sake of time, if I were doing this myself and I had all the time in the world, I would do that method just because I get real nervous and real spooked by the idea of adding anything to my Aida fabric. So what I would do is take some gray floss from my kit and lightly tack, or white, doesn't matter, lightly tack my Aida fabric circle to my craft felt circle that I cut out before class today. I just kind of tack it around the edges, make sure it was nice and tight back to itself. And then that is kind of what I would glue in my little sandwich that I'm about to make. What I would do is glue my little large fabric pancake, put a couple dabs of glue here. I have, oh, look, I have my visual aids. Glue. This is my favorite crafting glue. You can get it at Michael's or, Michael's online. It's powerful stuff. It's really powerful stuff. So whatever glue your preference is, you could probably use fabric glue for a lot of this. I would center it up, put some dabs of glue here, and then I already traced that center point. So I'd line that right up like this. Okay. And then we'd have that glued, and then I'd tack these together, put a little bit of glue or fabric glue there. And then when I put this into the thing, I have a cute little like dress all the way around. How cute is that? And if I wanted it to sort of lay like this, I could just like iron it, steam it with my iron. But then when I put it on my mason jar, it's gonna look really rustic and cute and homey, like everything you ever hoped and dreamed the Christmas holidays would and could be. And then, because it's a thin fabric, the mason jar still twists real nice. And ta-da, again, this would be a little bit smoother if I took the time to glue it, but we don't have time in class today. And then we've got this cute little ruffled edge. If you wanted to go all out, you could take some ribbon, you could sew or tack the ribbon all the way around there. It could be just about the cutest little cutie thing in the whole world. You can make it your own. I also brought like a cool, we've got all these vibrant colors with this Santa. And I was thinking it'd be really cool to do, if we just did kind of the minimalisty, you could even just take the ribbon and like, just do a nice wrap like this, just like a fun little wrap, and put your little card or recipe on there, just a little gluey on there, and just have it be a bit more of a modern looking, I love black and white. I love black and white stripes. I love bright colors, as you can tell by my colorful jungle background. So if I was doing Christmas presents, I might do this. I might add like a glitter ribbon. You could go all out. You could just be as extra as you want to be. You could glue ribbon around the jar with some pleats. That would give it a nice, some nice body. And this literally is just, I would glue dot, secure the ribbon, and then do another glue dot on the jar itself like this, and then a glue dot on the ribbon for this bump to go on. And then that gives it a little body to lay away from the mason jar. So if you're using a bit of a thicker fabric, this one, as you can tell, is really, really thin.
I'm gonna do that so it stops driving me crazy.
Fair enough, fair enough. So this fabric is really thin and was really easy to sandwich in between these two pieces, because ultimately the threads of the jar go over that piece of fabric. So a thin piece of fabric is not going to be an issue. But if you have something thicker, then I would definitely recommend, you know, getting tricky with your with ribbon or with fabric out on the outer edge, and you can just kind of glue all the way around. Like this is just another idea for you. You can just go crazy with them. It's a really fun for cross stitchers who are also crafters. Cross stitching can be very time consuming, and we can get really, really tied up with the cross stitching part of our crafting lives. That I think it's fun to integrate the cross stitching with other forms of crafting and sort of letting yourself get creative, being a little less adhering less to the counted cross stitch and to the grid, and getting everything just right and making sure it matches perfectly between this and your cross stitchy pattern. And oh my goodness, I made a mistake. That is a pitfall of a lot of cross stitchers. So allowing yourself the creative freedom, the ideas to do whatever the heck strikes your fancy with all, you know what? We've got another minute, and I just had another idea in this very moment because I was pulling in these fun floss colors. I love the bright colors for the presents, because why the heck not? Sack full of toys, you know what I mean? You could get real old school if you wanted to, and just like I used to do at camp when I was a kid, you could glue, you'd have to be careful with the threads of this, of course, but you could wrap your mason jar lid. And this would, again, especially depending on what you have in your jar, if you have candies that are pre-wrapped and don't need to be like airtight or preserved or anything like that, you could wrap your lid with Christmassy colors or with Santa's toys colors, what have you, and give it a little bit of slack so that the jar can still tighten up, because you want to avoid this pitfall right here where, oh, I can't, there you go. There's a little bit of space between if you wrap it too tight, and you want there to be a little slack so that it can get up and in there. But how cool would that look? You know, those old embroidery bracelets that were like, it's kind of like a satin stitch, but in bracelet form. And you could do that all the way around, and that would look so cool and elegant around your jar, and totally incorporate, if you wanted to, the colors from whatever cross stitch motif you chose to use for the front. So I'm curious, in our last couple minutes here, I'm surprised by how quickly this whole process went. Does anybody have any other ideas or anything else they'd like to see sort of as we are closing up here today? I'm curious if this gave anybody any ideas of what they're for sure going to go out and do, or any materials that they're going to go gather to integrate into this fun project. Do you like the idea of baked goods or candy, or like the recipe of the dry parts of cookie recipe? Is anybody going to actually go out and do this? That's what I want to know. Taffy stripe ribbon looks so nice. Yeah. Oh, I love it. It's so crisp. It's so clean. That's why I love black and white. I love things that are just really striking and clean. And I think it especially looks fun with the, you know, it's a kind of a kid's theme, Santa and toys. And it's just, yeah, it's a little bit, I don't want to say like circusy, but yeah, that candy stripe feel is just really, really fun. Great for teachers' presents. Yes, absolutely. Use it as an ornament. Yes, 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 yes. Teachers' presents. Totally. It doesn't have to be holiday related at all. You could do a cute little, you know, pencil with the teacher's name in it, a little stitch person portrait of the teacher. Maybe you fill it with fresh, you know, applesauce if you're into that, because like teachers and apples and that whole thing, or just candy, cookies. Nobody ever says no to a treat, right? But that would be so cute. And then that's something the teacher could use in their classroom as like a little treat jar, and it has, you know, Miss whatever, Mrs. Howe, she was my favorite fourth grade teacher. Miss Pike, my third grade teacher, you know, and that could just be the special teacher jar with the treats or the stickers or something in there. That would be something that a teacher would use like forever, as opposed to just a, you know, a Christmas gift that's like, well, you hope they use it next year for something. I love that. Baked ingredients. Ooh, Christmas pin cushion. Forget it. Joy, that is such a great idea, because if you kind of layer this with more felt, how would I do that? I would probably layer it with felt, or you could stuff, if you made like a little pocket, ooh, if you got real into it, you could sort of take a big circle onto your little circle, sew it down like this, and tack it so that you'd make like a nice little lip, set it in there, stuff it full of batting, kind of finish it off, and you could have a nice squishy backed pin cushion into which to put your needles, where I don't know where mine went. Oh, there we go. Like this. I just like to see things through. There we go. Nice little pin cushion. That is a really fun idea. Love it, love it, love it. Baked ingredients. Using a Cricut to cut out vinyl letters, putting the vinyl letters on the side of a jar, cookies for Santa, filled with cookies, topped with Santa. That's taken it to the next level. I love it. The ornament idea, pin cushion. I'm just so impressed with all of you. See this? This is why it's nice to get together, because not only is it like crafting with your friends, it's like crafting with your friends from all over the world who have so many cool ideas that we can integrate. Cricut idea, if you have a Cricut or a silhouette, I'm not sure which is which, but yeah, those, you could put vinyl letters, you could personalize the jars for everybody in your family. My goodness, if this would be a really fun idea to personalize, if you have a kid in your family who's like saving up for something, maybe they want a bike, or saving a little allowance jar, right? Or a saving jar, and you could stitch them and have a little, if you got real tricky, you could cut, you know, a little hole in it, and it could be its own piggy bank, and you stick coins or monies through there, and you could use your Cricut and come up with little saving, there we go, little goals, like, you know, those water bottles that tell you like 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m. You could just do that for whatever their saving goals are, or chores till they get their allowance or something like that. There's so many options. I love a mason jar. I love the cross stitching. We've got so much we can do with this. Thank you all so much for being here. In our last couple minutes, I'll just give you a reminder. I'm going to switch to, no, you know what? This is cuter than I am. So in our last couple minutes here, I just want to remind you, as you're making your pin cushions or your teacher gifts or your Santa gifts, whatever you would like, please show us your works in progress. We love to see them on Instagram, on Facebook. Tag it with the hashtag Make It With Michaels, all one word, hashtag DMC, 3 letters in a row, and hashtag Stitch People, all one word. That way we'll be able to find you and give you a big digital high five. Also, if you're interested, we have a lot more little motifs like this one. If you like this one, if you want a reindeer or an elf or all that, at stitchpeople.com, we have a ton of Christmas motifs. We just released a new book. Previously, our floral motifs book, this one that gives you an introduction for putting floral motifs on your cross stitch patterns, little embroidery techniques. This was our latest book, but now our latest book is holiday backgrounds, and it's a book of patterns of holiday scenes, you know, sitting at a Thanksgiving table, Hanukkah with the menorah, a Christmas tree and decorating your tree. It's a whole bunch of scenes where you can kind of put your family in there, a lot of which lend themselves, a lot of the pieces and accessories lend themselves to other similar motifs like this Santa that you could use on the jar. So check that out, stitchpeople.com. And don't forget to sign up for next week's class. We're going to be talking about making custom cross-stitched greeting cards for week 4. And you can sign up at stitchpeople.com/Michaels, get your pattern, get your materials lists, all of that. Hopefully we'll see you this same time, same place next week. And without further ado, I shall thank you once again for being here. It's always such a pleasure and a joy, and we'll hopefully see you next week. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye, friends.